Hello and welcome back. Today we're talking about public and private subnets. Now we've already discussed that a VPC is a regional service, so here's our VPC, and this one is going to be spread across two availability zones, AZA and AZB. For the purposes of today's tutorial, I'm illustrating the availability zones inside the VPC, although technically they're of course inside the region, and VPC is spread across the availability zones. Now, inside each availability zone, the VPC consists of subnets. Here we have two subnets in this availability zone and two subnets in the second availability zone. A subnet is simply a predefined range of IP addresses inside your VPC. And there are two types of subnets. There are public subnets and private subnets. And the key thing to understand is what makes a subnet public or private is simply how you configure it. By default, when you create a new subnet, it will be private, and then you can configure it to be accessible from the outside internet, and that will make it a public subnet. For example, the default VPC that comes with every region has a public subnet in every single availability zone and no private subnets. Now let's have a look at an example. Let's say we have three EC2 instances, and as we discussed in the previous tutorial, they can communicate with each other without absolutely any issues because they're all inside one VPC. Now, if the public internet wants to communicate with our public EC2 instance, the one in the public subnet, then it can do that through an internet gateway. We'll talk more about internet gateways in an upcoming tutorial, and vice versa, the EC2 instance can communicate with the outside internet. Now, our EC2 instance in a private subnet cannot be reached from the outside internet, and by default, it won't be able to just simply use the internet gateway to communicate with the outside world, but we could rectify that with a NAT gateway, which we'll talk about later on in the course. But one thing to remember is that what makes a private subnet private is that anything inside this private subnet is not reachable from the outside internet. One thing worth mentioning is that you can define any number of subnets in each availability zone from 0 to 1 to many subnets of each subnet type. Alright, that's all for today. Here's the text for this slide, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, enjoy the cloud.